Welcome to Leaping Larry's Revolutionary Reading Theatre.
And of course, today we are going to be doing Socialism and Man in Cuba. A read from Comrade Che Guevara. And the reason why I wanted to do this one here is because it's very much related to the Choo-Choo philosophy, which we were talking about last time. The Choo-Choo philosophy. No, the Juche philosophy. This is Rating a Theater, Potato King. So get comfortable, pack your pipes with your tobacco, your wacky tobacco, and do enjoy while I read to you. This was first published March 1965 under the title From Algiers to Marcha, The Cuban Revolution Today.
Hey, this guy's a commie! Commie! Traitor to our country!
Holy shit, common opponent. Thank you so much, comrade, for the 5 gift subs. What the fuck? Thank you. Let's see those Juche gang emotes before I start the read. And I'll have a little drink. Oh, of course, Common, of course. No problem. I will always be plugging Chunkaluda, given I am on the media team of Chunkaluda, so it feels necessary. Look, I'll flash my Juche gang sign to you all as well. And if you want a mug like this, by the way, you can get this and much more on my little Stream Elements store site, where I have been throwing stuff together for anyone who feels like they prefer something that way. Want a little something? If you want to get a little something in return, there you go. I got all kinds of stuff in here. And by the way, the Juche gang sign does come out extremely well in the embroidery, as we have seen from a couple comrades. And then down here at the bottom, anything that is marked specifically Chunkaluda, BWA Chunkaluda, well, the proceeds go directly to Chunkaluda itself. Whereas my proceeds go, of course, to feeding me first, to improving the stream, and then anything we have above and beyond that will go back to Chunkaluda. Now, without further ado, allow me to read to you. Absolutely, Common. Yeah, that would be great. I would love to see them on something. Dear Campanero, though belatedly, I am completing these notes in the course of my trip through Africa, hoping in this way to keep my promise. I would like to do so by dealing with the theme set forth in the title above. I think it may be of interest to Uruguayan readers.
Right? It's like,
Oh. God damn it. Hate that. I accidentally opened the window. Hold on. I always fucking right click down here and do that. Okay. A common argument from the mouths of capitalist spokespeople in the ideological struggle against socialism is that socialism, or the period of building socialism into which we have entered, is characterized by the abolition of the individual for the sake of the state. I will not try to refute this argument solely on theoretical grounds, but rather to establish the facts as they exist in Cuba, and then add comments of a general nature. Let me begin by broadly sketching the history of our revolutionary struggle before and after the taking of power. As is well known, the exact date of the beginning of the revolutionary struggle, which would culminate in January 1959, was July 26, 1953. A group led by Fidel Castro attacked the Moncada barracks in Orient province on the morning of that day. The attack was a failure. The failure became a disaster, and the survivors ended up in prison, beginning the revolutionary struggle again after they were freed by an amnesty. In this process, in which there was only the germ of socialism, the individual was a fundamental factor. We put our trust in him, individual, specific, with a first and last name. And the triumph or failure of the mission entrusted to him depended on that individual's capacity for action. Then came the stage of guerrilla struggle. It developed in two distinct environments. The people, still sleeping mass that had to be mobilized, and its vanguard, the guerrillas, the motor force of the mobilization, the generator of revolutionary consciousness and militant enthusiasm. This vanguard was the catalyzing agent that created the subjective conditions necessary for victory. Now, I just want you to think about what we talked about before when we were looking at Juche philosophy, right? Think about how Juche talks about, or what we discussed in particular about Juche regarding the leadership theory, right? And the role that leadership plays specifically in the movement itself. Think about what they're saying here. And specifically mentioning right here, right? Mobilizing, generating the revolutionary consciousness and militant enthusiasm. This vanguard was the catalyzing agent that created the subjective conditions necessary for victory. The reason I highlight subjective here, because the subjective factors of revolution are exactly those things which Juche arose to discover, right? Marxism-Leninism discovered scientifically the material laws that govern revolution, right? Juche then rose and said, well, now that we have discovered the material laws governing revolution and society's development, now what is humanity's role in that revolutionary struggle, and therefore what are the subjective laws of revolution? Well, such as the height of the revolutionary consciousness of the masses, the degree of their creative ability, right? And by consciousness, we of course, it means the awareness of their demand for independence from fetters, both social and natural. Here again, in the framework of proletarianization of our thinking, of this revolution that took place in our habits and our minds, the individual was the basic factor. Every one of the combatants of the Sierra Maestra who reached an upper rank in the revolutionary forces has a record of outstanding deeds to his or her credit. They attained their rank on this basis. First heroic period. This was the first heroic period, in which combatants competed for the heaviest responsibilities, for the greatest dangers, with no other satisfaction than fulfilling a duty. In our work of revolutionary education, we frequently to return to this instructive theme. In the attitude of our fighters could be glimpsed the man and woman of the future. On the occasions in our history, the act of total dedication to the revolutionary cause was repeated. During the October 1962 crisis, and in the days of Hurricane Flora, October 1963, we saw exceptional deeds of valor and sacrifice performed by an entire people. Finding the method to perpetuate this heroic attitude in daily life is, from the ideological standpoint, one of our fundamental tasks. In January 1959, the revolutionary government was established, with the participation of various members of the treacherous bourgeoisie. The presence of the rebel army was the basic element constituting the guarantee of power. Serious contradictions developed right away. In the first instance, February 1959, these were resolved when Fidel Castro assumed leadership of the government, taking the post of prime minister. This process culminated in July of the same year with the resignation under mass pressure of President Urrutia. In the history of the Cuban Revolution, there now appeared a character, well defined in its features, which would systematically reappear: the mass. This multifaceted being is not, as is claimed, the sum of elements of the same type, reduced moreover by that same type by the ruling system, which acts like a flock of sheep. It is true that it follows its leaders, basically Fidel Castro, without hesitation. But the degree to which he won this trust results precisely from having interpreted the full meaning of the people's desires and aspirations, and from the sincere struggle to fulfill the promises he made. Okay, Bob, cool. Thanks for the update, comrade. So I just want you to think about this, what he says right here. Remember what I have been teaching you, comrades, before about what the leadership theory in DPRK talks about, and think about what they're saying right here, right? He says, I would just want to repeat this part again. In the history of the Cuban Revolution, there now appeared a character, well defined in its features, which would systematically reappear: the mass. This multifaceted being is not, as is claimed, the sum elements of the same type, which acts like a flock of sheep. It is true that it follows its leaders, basically Fidel Castro, without hesitation. But the degree to which he won this trust results precisely from having interpreted the full meaning of the people's desires and aspirations, and from the sincere struggle to fulfill the promises he made. Think about that. In relation to what I've taught you, comrades, or tried to teach you about the way leadership develops in a socialist society, right? And we will circle around back to that eventually as well, too. Participation of the masses. The mass participated in the agrarian reform and in the difficult task of administering state enterprises. It went through the heroic experience of the Bay of Pigs, It was hardened in the battles against various groups of bandits armed by the CIA. It lived through one of the most important decisions of modern times during the October missile crisis. And today, it continues to work for the building of socialism. Viewed superficially, it might appear that those who speak of the subordination of the individual to the state are right. The mass carries out with matchless enthusiasm and discipline the tasks set by the government. Whether in the fields of the economy, culture, defense, sports, etc. The initiative generally comes from Fidel, or from the revolutionary leadership, and is explained to the people, who make it their own. In some cases, the party and government take a local experience and generalize it, following the same procedure. That's how revolutionary leadership works. Really like that. Nevertheless, the state sometimes makes mistakes. When one of these mistakes occurs, one notes a decline in collective enthusiasm due to the effect of a quantitative diminution of each of the elements that make up the mass. Work is paralyzed until it is reduced to an insignificant level. It is time to make a correction. That is what happened in March 1962. As a result of the sectarian policy imposed on the party by Anibal Escalante. Clearly, this mechanism is not enough to ensure a succession of sensible measures. A more structured connection with the mass is needed, and we must improve it in the course of the coming years. But as far as initiatives originating in the upper strata of the government are concerned, we are correctly utilizing the almost intuitive method of sounding out general reactions to the great problems we confront. In this, Fidel is the master. His own special way of fusing himself with the people can be appreciated only by seeing him in action. At the great public mass meetings, one can observe something like the dialogue of two tuning forks whose vibrations interact, producing new sounds. Fidel and the mass begin to vibrate together in a dialogue of growing intensity until they reach the climax in an abrupt conclusion crowned by the cry of struggle and victory. The difficult thing to understand for someone not living through the experience of the revolution is this close dialectical unity between the individual and the mass, in which both are interrelated and, at the same time, in which the mass, as an aggregate of individuals, interacts with its leaders. Some phenomena of this kind can be seen under capitalism, when politicians appear capable of mobilizing popular opinion. But when these are not genuine social movements, if they were, it would not be entirely correct to call them capitalist. They live only so long as the individual who inspires them, or until the harshness of capitalist society puts an end to the people's illusions. Invisible laws of capitalism. In capitalist society, individuals are controlled by a pitiless law, usually beyond their comprehension. The alienated human specimen is tied to society as a whole by an invisible umbilical cord, the law of value. This law acts upon all aspects of one's life, shaping its course and destiny. The laws of capitalism, which are blind and are invisible to ordinary people, act upon the individual without he or she being aware of it. One sees only the vastness of a seemingly infinite horizon ahead. That is how it is painted by capitalist propagandists who purport to draw a lesson from the example of Rockefeller. Whether or not it is true, about the possibilities of individual success. The amount of poverty and suffering required for a Rockefeller to emerge, and the amount of depravity entailed in the accumulation of a fortune of such magnitude are left out of the picture. And it is not always possible for the popular forces to expose this clearly. A discussion of how the workers in the imperialist countries gradually lose the spirit of working class internationalism due to a certain degree of complicity in the exploitation of the dependent countries, and how this at the same time weakens the combativity of the masses in imperialist countries would be appropriate here, but that is a theme that goes beyond the scope of these notes. In any case, the road to success is portrayed as beset with perils. Perils that, it would seem, an individual without the proper qualities can overcome to attain the goal. Reward is seen in the distance. The way is lonely. Furthermore, it is a contest among wolves. One can win only at the cost of failure of others. The individual and socialism. Welcome back, Mama. I would now like to try to define the individual, the actor in this strange and moving drama of the building of socialism, in a dual existence as a unique being and as a member of society. I think the place to start is to recognize the individual's quality of incompleteness, of being an unfinished product. The vestiges of the past are brought into the present in one's consciousness, and a continual labor is necessary to eradicate them. The process is two-sided. On the one hand, society acts through direct and indirect education. On the other, the individual submits to a conscious process of self-education. The new society in formation has to compete fiercely with the past. The past makes itself felt not only in one's consciousness, in which the residue of an education systematically oriented toward isolating the individual still weighs heavily, but also through the very character of this transition period in which commodity relations still persist. The commodity is the economic cell of capitalist society. So long as it exists, its effects will make themselves felt in the organization of production and, consequently, in consciousness. Marx outlined the transition period as resulting from the explosive transformation of the capitalist system, destroyed by its own contradictions. In historical reality, however, we have seen that some countries that were weak limbs of the tree of imperialism were torn off first, a phenomenon foreseen by Lenin. In these countries, capitalism had developed sufficiently to make its effects felt by the people in one way or the other. But it was not capitalism's internal contradictions that, having exhausted all possibilities, caused the system to explode. The struggle for liberation from a foreign oppressor, the misery caused by external events such as war, whose consequences privileged classes place on the backs of the exploited, liberation movements aimed at overthrowing neo-colonial regimes. These are the usual factors in unleashing this kind of explosion. Conscious action does the rest. A complete education for social labor has not yet taken place in these countries, and wealth is far from being within the reach of the masses through the simple process of appropriation. Underdevelopment, on the one hand, and the usual flight of capital on the other, make a rapid transition without sacrifices impossible. There remains a long way to go in constructing the economic base, and the temptation is very great to follow the beaten track of material interest as the lever with which to accelerate development. There is the danger that the forest will not be seen for the trees. The pipe dream that socialism can be achieved with the help of the dull instruments left to us by capitalism. The commodity as the economic cell, profitability, individual material interests as the lever, etc., can lead into a blind alley, as Kim Jong-il told us before, by the way. When you wind up there, after having traveled a long distance with many crossroads, it is hard to figure out just where you took the wrong turn. Meanwhile, the economic foundation that had been laid has done its work of undermining the development of consciousness. To build communism, it is necessary, simultaneously with the new material foundations, to build the new man and woman. Any of this sounding like the Juche work we read here, comrades? Anyone getting Juche vibes yet? Just curious. We read Juche philosophy, the whole compilation. We read this work here before we were doing this one. This reminding you of that at all, anyone? New consciousness. Yeah, Jusha. You know, Jusha. But you know what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying here, though? They're talking about consciousness, right? Talking about the importance of consciousness. To build communism in simultaneously with building material foundations, we have to build a new humanity as well, right? That these old ideas persist for a long time. You see? And what's interesting is low-key, this is from 1965. He low-key fucking predicted the undermining and overthrow of USSR here, if you're paying attention close enough. About 10 years after, by the way, over 10 years after Stalin wrote Socialism, Economic Problems of Socialism in the USSR, and warned of that causing a problem as well. Can't spell Juche without Che. I mean, yeah, Che, you know what? And I mean, look. You don't think Che Guevara studied Juche? Look at that. And I would say also in his own struggle, reaching the same conclusions as Kim Il Sung and Juche theorists were. And I love that DPRK, by the way, is one country that never shied from the whole personality cult nonsense that Khrushchev started, right? They have let their people unite around the leader as they did voluntarily, and you know what? They are developing without any like deviation. She wasn't even a communist. No. Shut up! Those chatters are really too much. Okay. New consciousness. Again, Continuing on with the Juche stuff. Chatters really are too much, though. Keep them away from me, is what I say. Hey, Halligay Jamie, welcome, comrade. Hope you are well. We're just reading Socialism and Man in Cuba right here from Che Guevara. And we're remarking how remarkably similar this work is to Juche philosophy in general. Like, oh, I'm all excited. Now I got a new person in here. But, like, for example, I just want to quote this one part again. Like this part right here, where he talks about the individuals and the masses, right? And he talks about here how in the history of the Cuban Revolution there now appeared a character, well defined in its features, which would systematically reappear: the mass. This multifaceted being is not, as it is claimed, the sum of elements of the same type, which acts like a flock of sheep. It is true that it follows its leaders, basically Fidel Castro without hesitation. But the degree to which he won this trust results precisely from having interpreted the full meaning of the people's desires and aspirations, and from the sincere struggle to fulfill the promises he made. Like, that's important for clarifying the way leadership interacts in the DPRK, as I tried to explain to comrades in other episodes of this. In other episodes of Leaping Larry Live. That works. That sounds fine. And then, like, to continue on, he talks about here, like, in this, Fidel is the master. His own special way of fusing himself with the people can be appreciated only by seeing him in action. At the great public mass meetings, one can observe something like a dialogue of two tuning forks, whose vibrations interact, producing new sounds. Fidel and the mass begin to vibrate together in a dialogue of growing intensity until they reach the climax in an abrupt conclusion crowned by our cry of struggle and victory. The difficult thing to understand for someone not living through the experience of the revolution is this close dialectical unity between the individual and the mass, in which both are interrelated and, at the same time, in which the mass as an aggregate of individuals interacts with its leaders. Love that. Some phenomena of this kind can be seen under capitalism, when politicians appear capable of mobilizing popular opinion. But when these are not genuine social movements, and if they were genuine, they would not be entirely correct to call them capitalists, they live only so long as the individual who inspires them, or until the harshness of capitalist society puts an end to the people's illusions. Follow Mama and Media, by the way, comrades. I tried to beat it, but I didn't. But I think that right there, like, goes a long way to telling you exactly how leadership also in the DPRK is grounded as well. Because, as I point out, in a socialist society, like, one of the most important things is that leaders, like, to take DPRK for example, because there's no presidency, there's no single vote system, there is no such thing as, like, a head of state necessarily in DPRK, if you want to be, like, scientific about it, right? Instead, the Supreme People's Assembly is the highest legislative body, so they make up about, like, 1/8 of what the presidency is. And then you have the cabinet, which is the highest executive body. There's another piece of what the presidency would be. Then you have, like, the State Affairs Commission, which is the military. That's another piece of what the presidency would be. In a capitalist society, the president appoints all of these things, right? In a socialist society, it doesn't. So just as Che Guevara was mentioning here, the way, therefore, leaders lead in a socialist society is by these talks, by giving speeches and putting forward works, etc., that are inspirational and reflect the demands and desires of the masses. And through gaining their trust over the course of many years, as he mentioned, people more and more quickly and more enthusiastically follow the leadership of the working party, right? And this is the role that the leader occupies in the revolution. Meg. And that's why, like, for example, between the leader and his fighters, and between the leader and his people, there exists not a relationship of domination and obedience, but only the duty of love and return for that love. Because anything that the leader's putting forward in speeches or whatever, whoever the masses have chosen as the leader, right? Whatever the leader puts forward in masses and speeches, the masses not only decide to follow that voluntarily, but they also have to creatively adapt whatever the party line is, whatever the leader's speech that talked about. They have to creatively adapt that for their own situation, right? And that's what the job of the various party members are all over the country, the various cells all over the country, like what their job is. And then you have other political parties in the socialist society which don't compete for power because no party can actually have state power anyway. So instead, they work on the same front, but in their own ways with their own people that are in their organization. Like in DPRK, you have the Social Democratic Party, you have the Chongduist Religious Believers Party, and a bunch of other stuff as well. But in socialism, in the world of comradeship, there is only the faith that I am you and you are me, together with love and loyalty. Sounds like a fucking song, doesn't it? Like that could be a metal song. In the world of comradeship, you know, something like that. Together with love and loyalty. Right? It doesn't. I think that. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. That's gonna go with her candy for today. That's gonna start off her candy. Thank you for that. Whoa. Okay. In the world of comradeship, there is only the faith that I am you. I love this fucking thing so much. Someone needs to add this to a command. We need to add that to a command somehow. In the world of comradeship, there is only the faith that I am you and you are me, together with love and loyalty. I can just like hear the music in my head. Okay. Anyway, we were on new consciousness. That is why it is very important to choose the right instrument for mobilizing the masses. Basically, this instrument must be moral in character, without neglecting, however, the correct use of the material incentive, especially of a social character. My God. Literally, like almost heard exactly almost this in that. I just want to know when this one was given. Okay, cool. So yeah, amazing. We got to look at some Kim Il Sung after too. It's amazing how they were all coming to this subjective analysis, or I mean, this law. What this demonstrates, or what I hope it does demonstrate to you, is that Juche revealing the subjective laws of revolution proves to you that they are subjective laws of revolution, right? Because here you can see Che Guevara, you can see other communists arriving at the same conclusions as Juche for that same reason, right? Because there are scientific laws that you can independently discover. This is why Black Panther Party Huey Newton said in 1970 that we are not mechanical Marxists and we are not historical materialists. They are, however, a Marxist-Leninist party because they follow the dialectical method and integrate theory with practice. As I have already said, in moments of great peril, it is easy to muster a powerful response with moral incentives. Retaining their effectiveness, however, requires the development of a consciousness in which there is a new scale of values. Society as a whole must be converted into a gigantic school. In rough outline, this phenomenon is similar to the process by which capitalist consciousness is formed in its initial period. Capitalism uses force, but it also educates people in the system. Direct propaganda is carried out by those entrusted with explaining the inevitability of class society, either through some theory of divine origin or a mechanical theory of natural law. This lulls the masses, since they see themselves as being oppressed by an evil against which it is impossible to struggle. Next comes hope of improvement. And in this, capitalism differed from the earlier caste systems, which offered no way out. For some people, the principle of the caste system will remain in effect. The reward for the obedient is to be transported after death to some fabulous other world where, according to old beliefs, good people are rewarded. For other people, there is this innovation. Class divisions are determined by fate, but individuals can rise out of their class through work, initiative, etc. This process, and the myth of the self-made man, has to be profoundly hypocritical. It is the self-serving demonstration that a lie is the truth. In our case, direct education acquires much greater importance. The explanation is convincing because it is true. No subterfuge is needed. It is carried on by the state's educational apparatus as a function of general, technical, and ideological education, through such agencies as the Ministry of Education and the party's informational apparatus. Education takes hold among the masses, and the foreseen new attitude tends to become a habit. The masses continue to make it their own and to influence those who have not yet educated themselves. This is the indirect form of educating the masses, as powerful as the other, structured one. Thank you, Sam, for adding that. That's awesome. Bars, yes, perfect, perfect, thank you. That's amazing. Conscious process of self-education. But the process is a conscious one. Individuals continually feel the impact of the new social power and perceive that they do not entirely measure up to its standards. Under the pressure of indirect education, they try to adjust themselves to a situation that they feel is right, and that their own lack of development had prevented them from reaching previously. In other words, they educate themselves. In this period of building socialism, we can see the new man and woman being born. The image is not yet completely finished. It never will be, since the process goes forward hand in hand with the development of new economic forms. Aside from those whose lack of education makes them take the solitary road towards satisfying their own personal ambitions, there are those, even within the new panorama of a unified march forward, who have a tendency to walk separately from the masses, accompanying them. What is important, however, is that each day individuals are acquiring ever more consciousness of the need for their incorporation into society and, at the same time, of their importance as the motor of that society. Because they're the subject of history. I refer back to your Juche work class. The masses are the subject of history. Say it in chat with me now. I want everyone to type. The masses are the subject of history. Good. Exactly. Land back to you, Tay. The masses are the subject of history. They are that thing. They are that thing which causes history to happen, right? Which is, it's very important. There's actually a bit of a contrast here, right? Like if we go back just for a second, I won't go back far, I promise. But there was one where he said about Marxism. Yes. Right here, right here. So, this is very important, right? The reason why the masses being the subject of history and conscious agents of change and therefore revolution, right? We have to understand that there is some limitations and possible, not saying if you apply Marxism creatively it's going to happen, but it's possible to misinterpret Marx, right? And come out with this sort of mechanical economic reductionist or class reductionist viewpoint. Like, and Che Guevara actually really puts it, he's very clever with his words, okay? Muy importante, exactly. He's very like purposeful with his words, and they're very poetic sounding, but he does a really good job of just like, and you might miss it, right? But here he says, Marx outlined the transition period resulting from the explosive transformation of the capitalist system, destroyed by its own contradictions. Okay, Tay. Good luck voting, comrade. Appreciate you listening in, of course. So it's very important here. This destroyed by its own contradictions. It's Fidel said, right? It is well known that revolution in America and the rest of the world will triumph, but it is not for revolutionaries to sit with arms crossed in the doorways of their houses, waiting for the corpse of imperialism to pass them by. Meaning, to use another quote from his best friend, Che Guevara, the revolution is not an apple that falls, right? You have to make it fall. And this is very important because, as I said, you can interpret Marxism in this sort of way, right? And even this way, like, yes, Lenin was right here, of course. In historical reality, however, we have seen that some countries that were weak limbs of the tree of imperialism were torn off first. True. Absolutely true. But now what we have also seen since Lenin's observation is that also where imperialism isn't even weak, where imperialism is strong and focused and dedicated, we have even seen revolution win. Well, how can that be? So now it's not capitalism's own internal contradictions. Let's take Korea. It's not capitalism's own internal contradictions, right? Capitalism is not highly developed there yet. Their bourgeoisie are not highly connected with other bourgeoisie. In fact, they resisted penetration of the market until Japanese imperialism specifically, right? Russia, of course, that emerged where revolution was the weakest, or where imperialism was the weakest, sorry, and therefore revolution emerged. Well, in Korea, that wasn't the case, because here you had imperialists very interested in taking Korea, right? Imperialism wasn't weak in Korea at all. It was strong, and it was gaining an extremely strong foothold in Korea, setting up a comprador government and everything else. But still, revolution won. And the only reason why revolution and Korea didn't take the entire peninsula with their native government is because the imperialists threatened a nuclear bomb against them. And it was less than a decade before that they had bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's not just like an empty threat of, oh, you did that decades ago. No, they literally just nuked Japan twice, right? So why would Korea have any doubts about them just nuking Korea? So they said, "Oh, fine. If you're gonna nuke us, we'll split at the 38th parallel." Korea, of course, sees this as their temporary measure, which it is. Eventually, the imperialists will be kicked out, and it'll be won. But this shows you that revolution doesn't break out necessarily where imperialism is the weakest or where the contradictions of capitalism are the highest. It breaks out where the masses are armed with revolutionary consciousness, right? And one factor that can play a huge role in this, as Che Guevara has pointed out, is that a leader emerges within that a leader emerges within the working class, is brought to the fore by the working class. Again, if we go back to the top, how Lenin talks about, or how Che talks about, Fidel got there by correctly reflecting the demands and desires of the masses, and is propelled there by their own enthusiasm and their own uniting behind him, right? Like, when this happens, it accelerates movements to an extreme degree. Look at Fred Hampton, for example. Right? You could see this emerge with Fred Hampton, I would say. And the state absolutely knew that it emerged with Fred Hampton. They identified this is a dangerous revolutionary individual who is causing causing revolutionary enthusiasm, etc. They use, who knows what language they use. I'm sure it's disgusting. But this is basically what they're seeing, right? And why they attack Fred Hampton in particular. It's like, it's a weird thing that we get in, that I think some leftists get into, where they ignore the character or they ignore the factor of leaders in the revolution. And therefore they ignore why it was so important about the state taking out someone like Fred Hampton or someone like Huey Newton, right? It was important to take out those individuals. Their ideas do live on, yes, of course, and people still struggle in their ideas. But leaders that the masses bring to the fore are able to inspire them and bring out this revolutionary enthusiasm in a way that has never been seen in human society before. You know? Think about that march that just happened in the US and in many other places in the world. How enormous that was, right? Imagine that type of movement, and sometimes even bigger than that, emerging behind a leader that's fighting against a direct colonial occupation, etc. And another factor that Che Guevara points out is right here, of course. In these countries, capitalism had developed sufficiently to make its effects felt by the people in one way or another. Korea, for example, was another one that it did. But it was not capitalism's internal contradictions that, having exhausted all possibilities, caused the system to explode. The struggle for liberation from a foreign oppressor, the misery caused by the external events such as war, whose consequences privileged classes place on the backs of the exploited. Liberation movements aimed at overthrowing neocolonial regimes. These are the usual factors in unleashing this kind of explosion. Conscious action does the rest. Just wanted to reiterate that part. Okay, Mama and Media, have a good stream, comrade. So now I'll continue on with this part. And again, as I'm reading all this, I want you to try and remember, if you were here for previous streams, I want you to try and remember what I've been trying to teach you about how leadership works in a socialist society. Not how leadership should work, but how leadership has emerged in every single movement. Again, whether it's Lenin in Russia, whether it's Marx himself in his country, whether it's Ho Chi Minh, whether, you can't ignore and even leaders that have succeeded them. You can't ignore the role of these leaders in the revolution, right? And even leaders who never made it to state power, like I pointed out, Fred Hampton, Huey Newton, there's many more. They all play an important role because individuals are a mass aggregate, or the masses are an aggregate of individuals, right? All right, I'm done rambling now. I'll continue. Conscious process of self-education. But the process is a conscious one. Individuals continually feel the impact of the new social power and perceive that they do not entirely measure up to its standards. Under the pressure of indirect education, they try to adjust themselves to a situation that they feel is right, and that their own lack of development had prevented them from reaching previously. They educate themselves. In this period of building socialism, we can see the new man and woman being born. The image is not yet completely finished. It never will be, since the process goes forward hand in hand with the development of economic forms. Aside from those who lack education, makes them take the solitary road towards satisfying their own personal ambitions, there are those, even within this new phenomena of a unified march forward, who have a tendency to walk separately from the masses accompanying them. What is important, however, is that each day individuals are acquiring ever more consciousness of the need for the incorporation into society and at the same time of their importance of the motor of that society, the subject of the revolution. They no longer travel completely alone over lost roads towards distant aspirations. They follow their vanguard, consisting of the party, the advanced workers, the advanced individuals who walk in unity with the masses and in close communion with them. The vanguard has its eyes fixed on the future and its reward. But this is not a vision of reward for the individual. The prize is a new society in which individuals will have different characteristics. The society of communist human beings. The road is long and full of difficulties. At times we lose our way and must turn back. Oh God, don't cry. Hold on. Okay. The road is long and full of difficulties. At times we lose our way and must turn back. At other times we go too fast and separate ourselves from the masses. Why does this always happen to me? Sometimes we go too slow and feel the hot breath of those treading on our heels. In our zeal as revolutionaries, we try to move ahead as fast as possible, clearing the way. Stop. But we know we must draw our nourishment from the mass and that it can advance more rapidly only if we inspire it by our example. Despite the importance given to moral incentives, the fact that there remains a division into two main groups, excluding of course the minority that for one reason or another does not participate in the building of socialism, indicates the relative lack of development of social consciousness. The vanguard group is ideologically more advanced than the masses. The latter understands the new values, but not sufficiently. While among the former, there has been a qualitative change that enables them to make sacrifices in their capacity as an advance guard. The latter see only part of the picture and must be subject to incentives and pressures of a certain intensity. This is the dictatorship of the proletariat. operating not only on the defeated class, but also on individuals of the victorious class. All of this means that, for total success, a series of mechanisms, of revolutionary institutions is needed. Along with the image of the multitudes marching towards the future comes the concept of institutionalization as a harmonious set of channels, steps, restraints, and well-oiled mechanisms, which facilitate the advance, which facilitate the natural selection of those destined to march in the vanguard, and which bestows rewards on those who fulfill their duties and punishments on those who commit crime against society that is being built. Man, that part really choked me up, chat. I'm sorry about that. That one part really tugged on the heartstrings. The institutionalization of the revolution. The institutionalization of the revolution has not yet been achieved. We are looking for something new. Hey, Ninja Can. It was this part. It was just this part right here. When they talked about this part right here, it kind of got me choked up. The road is long and full of difficulties. At times we lose our way and must turn back. At other times we go too fast and separate ourselves from the masses. Sometimes we go too slow and feel the hot breath of those treading on our heels. In our zeal as revolutionaries, we try to move ahead as fast as possible, clearing the way. But we know we must draw our nourishment from the mass, and that it can advance more rapidly only if we inspire it by our examples. We should get choked up. I agree. It's just, growing up in Canada, they train you to apologize all the fucking time. I can't help it. It's the Canadian indoctrination. Fuck you, Trudeau. Damn, I wish I had that Hallmark card, Ninja Can. Yay, let our beards entangle, and the warmth of that entanglement light the way of society. Or something. Or warm the coldness of space. Or something like that. Our beards entangled are gonna warm. Finish the sentence, chat. You got it. You can get it. Don't cross the beards. Oh shit. Wait, is that like Ghostbusters? Groot at the end with her beards. Yes, exactly. We'll cover all our comrades and keep them safe in her beard. I'm trying to learn my Fidel. Am I getting there? You getting close yet? Wait, right, I still. Yeah, it's getting close. All right, cool. I did it, chat. Fidel, right there. That's him. Channeling the inner Fidel. I'm Fidel's less illegitimate son. I'm the one he didn't disown. The institutionalization of the revolution has not yet been achieved. We are looking for something new that will permit a complete identification between the government and the community in its entirety. Something appropriate to the special conditions of the building of socialism, while avoiding at all costs transplanting the commonplaces of bourgeois democracy, such as legislative chambers, for example, into the society of formation. Some experiments aimed at the gradual institutionalization of the revolution have been made, but without undue haste. The greatest break has been our fear lest any appearance of formality might separate us from the masses and from the individual, which might make us lose sight of the ultimate and most important revolutionary aspiration to see human beings liberated from their alienation. I love Junior Men's Falcon. Despite the lack of institutions, which must be overcome gradually, the masses are now making history as a conscious collective of individuals fighting for the same cause. The individual under socialism, despite apparent standardization, is more complete. Despite the lack of perfect mechanism for it, the opportunities for self-expression and making oneself felt in the social organism are infinitely greater. It is still necessary to deepen conscious participation, individual and collective, in all the structures of management and production, and to link this to the idea of the need for technical and ideological education, so that the individual will realize that these processes are closely interdependent, and their advancement is parallel. In this way, the individual will reach total consciousness as a social being, which is equivalent to the full realization as a human creature. Once the chains of alienation are broken, this will be translated concretely into the reconquering of one's true nature through liberated labor, and the expression of one's own human condition through culture and art. Remember how I keep telling you, comrades, that there is... Hey, ICB, welcome in. Remember how I keep telling you, comrades, that there is this erroneous tendency that even Michael Perenni pointed out of certain Marxists to go, I don't think there's any inherent human nature at all, right? Think about it. Right? Because the reaction to like the old vulgar materialist and the old idealist viewpoint, which was that human nature is inherently greedy, inherently breaks into class societies, all these things, right? That's what was commonly referred to as human nature. But the only reason those things were ever referred to as human nature is because you had the ruling class employ agents to try and justify the exploitative ruling class societies that they lived in, right? It's the only reason. And that's why that whole idea is totally disjointed, as we should say. Yes, his channel... A very unfortunate thing happened. A very, very unfortunate thing happened last night. But yeah. But see... Nature, right. But see what I'm... So after years and years and so long of fighting... so long of bourgeois society justifying these reactionary aspects of their classed, oppressive societies as human nature, then Marxism arose, and as a result of some Marxist analyses from some people, you have this tendency with certain sections of the left to say, oh, well, therefore there is no inherent human nature at all, which I think is a mistake. I think that's not correct. Because if human beings don't have a nature, we are the only fucking thing in the world that doesn't have a nature, right? We don't have the nature that, again, was used to try and justify class societies, but we do have a nature, right? And like for example, one of those natures is that because humanity is a social being, we require social collective and social cooperation in order to even exist as a being. Like I've pointed out before, the entire existence of feral children proves that without humans as individuals participating in human society, they don't become yeah, we are mammals which do, yeah, we do better in a communal setting. Yes, that's true. But humans also in a socialist society, right? If humans grow up as individuals completely divorced from socialist society and don't interact with any other humans, they don't really like become this like a human like we are, right? Like they, of course, there are still human beings biologically, but they are not human beings in the same social being sense. Like Kwame Ture says, they may even try to make a contribution to monkey society, right? Like a human is the only one where you take it from its society and all of a sudden it grows up and it doesn't behave like a human, right? A dog or a monkey you can take from their society and they grow up and they'll, of course, all kinds of problems. Yes, not discounting any of that, but they will still grow up and act like a monkey or act like a dog, you know? That's not the case with humans. And as Kwame Ture points out, and a human living in monkey society may even try to make a contribution to monkey culture, right? But yeah, ICB, Lennon got a ban while I was on there talking last night. I was literally like in the middle of saying a sentence, and then the screen just went black and Lennon was gone. Just like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, and one thing that you alluded to, Red Falcon, is because of what I'm saying, like humans, obviously, therefore, by our very nature, are collective. And the entire idea of individualism is therefore contradictory to our nature. I would say there's other human natures as well. Like I agree with Juche. Human nature is independence, creativity, and consciousness. Those are the three aspects of human nature. And that society develops and struggle and class struggle and liberation struggle all emerges as a reflection of our struggle to materialize independence from, that is the desire of independence from all social fetters, creative ability to transform raw materials and other things into new forms, and consciousness, which is of course the human trait which enables us to not only understand society and overcome fetters of society, but enables us to understand objective scientific laws in nature, and therefore conduct creative activity that is better suited to realizing our demand relative to those conditions. Like, for example, making the West Sea barrage in order to ensure fresh water for your crops, you know? Or a hydroelectric dam, or whatever. Blasting off into space is a result of it. I mean, everything humans do is. Yep, this is why I was always thinking about trying to get us thinking about careers. Political science was always something that came up. Even like at like 10, my first thought was there should be more anthropologists and political science. Yeah. Okay, I'll continue now. A little bit of a sidebar there. It is still necessary to deepen conscious participation, individual and collective. Oh wait, I already read that part. Oh,
Let's go, Smokes.
Let's go, Smokes.
New status of work. In order to develop a new culture, work must acquire a new status. Human beings as commodities cease to exist. And a system is installed that establishes a quota for the fulfillment of one's social duty. The means of production belong to society.
Communism is based.
And the machine is merely the trench where duty is performed. A person begins to become free from thinking of the annoying fact that one needs to work to satisfy one's animal needs. Individuals start to see themselves reflected in their work and to understand their full stature as human beings, through the object created, through the work accomplished. Work no longer entails surrendering part of one's being in the form of labor power sold, which no longer belongs to the individual, but becomes an expression of oneself, a contribution to the common life in which one is reflected, the fulfillment of one's social duty. We are doing everything possible to give work this new status as a social duty and to link it to, on the one hand, with the development of technology, which will create conditions for greater freedom, and on the other hand, with voluntary work based on Marxist appreciation, that one truly reaches a full human condition when no longer compelled to produce by the physical necessity to sell oneself as a commodity. Of course, there are still coercive aspects to work, even when it is voluntary. We have not transformed all the coercion that surrounds us into conditioned reflexes of a social character and, in many cases, is still produced under the pressure of one's environment. Fidel calls this moral compulsion. There is still a need to undergo a complete spiritual rebirth in one's attitude towards one's own work, freed from the direct pressure of social environment. Though linked by new habits, that will be communism. The change in consciousness does not take place automatically, just as the change in the economy does not take place automatically. The alterations are slow and not rhythmic. There are periods of acceleration, periods that are slower, and even retrogresses. Furthermore, we must take into account, as I pointed out before, that we are not dealing with a period of pure transition, as Marx envisaged in his critique of the Gotha program, but rather with a new phase unforeseen by him, an initial period of transition to communism, or of the construction of socialism. This transition is taking place in the midst of violent class struggles, and with elements of capitalism within it that obscure a complete understanding of its essence. If we add to this scholasticism that has held back the development of Marxist philosophy and impeded a systematic treatment of the transition period, whose political economy has not yet been developed, we must agree that we still are in diapers, and that it is still necessary to devote ourselves to investigating all the principal characteristics of this period before elaborating an economic and political theory of greater scope. Which Juche does years later with this work here in the 80s. Is it starting to click in yet, anyone? Once they built a socialist system, and now once they had the foundation of a socialist system firmly laid, then it was up to DPRK in their unique position they were in to develop a new philosophy that did do exactly what Che Guevara says right here. To put forward and elaborating further the economic and political theory of greater scope that then takes into account liberation of national liberation, takes into account all these other aspects of revolution, as well as what the masses are doing. These other aspects of revolution are what we call the subjective factors of revolution, by the way. as well as what is new in a socialist society and how socialist society develops that is different from how capitalism develops. Oh, perfect. The resulting theory will no doubt put great stress on the two pillars of the construction of socialism: the education of the new man and woman, and the development of technology. Much remains to be done in regard to both, but delay is least inexcusable in regard to the concept of technology as a basic foundation, since this is not a question of going forward blindly, but of following a long stretch of road already opened up by the world's more advanced countries. This is why Fidel pounds away with such insistence on the need for the technological and scientific training of our people, and especially of its vanguard.
Society, their produce have not lived like a human being. They have lived life as an animal. Thus, in the first instance, we come to tell you just.
Okay, here's the Kwame Ture part I was talking about right here.
The sound for Brother Ture.
No problem.
Leftist audio problems, chat.
We say that they should come as a cow. At least here, they will have served humanity. So we want to make it clear, any human being who comes on the face of the earth, consumes more than they produce, have not lived like a human being. They have lived life as an animal. Thus, in the first instance, we come to tell you, just as Norman people, that to live a proper life, you must produce more than you consume. We come to tell you that you certainly have a responsibility to your people, not only to your people, but certainly to all of humanity. This can be properly understood just from human beings themselves. No human being can grow to their human potential isolated from other human beings. All human beings can only grow up as human beings among other human beings. Biological facts are clear here. If you take a cat, a kitten, the minute it's born, you take a dog, a puppy, the minute it's born, you take a child, an infant, the minute it's born, and you throw all three in the woods, the puppy will grow up to be a dog. It will walk on all four, it'll bark, it'll love bones. The kitten will grow up to be a cat, it'll walk on all four, it'll meow, it'll love mice. But the child, it's questioned whether or not the child will ever grow up. Why, the child might scratch itself to death, since no one will cut its nails. And one thing is clear, even if the child does survive, the child will be incapable of making any contribution to human society because that child was not socialized by human society. We can push the point to its logical conclusion. We can say that an animal, a human being separated from the human species, is more stupid than any other animal separated from its species. Let us take the same example of the puppy, the kitten, and the child. Let us throw them to grow up with monkeys. I promise you that this kitten that has never seen a monkey, when it's opened his eyes, it will walk like a cat, it'll meow, it'll chase mice. The dog will do the same thing. It'll walk like a dog, it'll bark, it'll chase bones. But the human being, the child, it will eat monkey food, it will walk like a monkey, it will talk like a monkey. Why, it will even try to make a contribution to monkey culture.
Well, okay, you Cinnamon. I mean, I get the point there, but actually, he could have used it. We could have used a different example as well, right? But yeah, our biological bodies, our evolution definitely comes from apes, right? But he could have definitely made the same point even with wolves as well. But yeah, I know you know Cinnamon, but it's funny because like if he would have made that point with wolves, right? Because making the point with monkeys does leave some like eco liberals to say that in response, not realizing like we're talking about a fundamentally different thing, right? There, I hope that helps again get across what I was saying earlier about humanity being the only social being. That's why Juche philosophy says humanity is the only known social being to us. Animals, of course, do live in groups in certain orders, but they are not social beings because they do not do that thing that Kwame Ture just described there. Yeah, James Woolard, exactly. Individualism. In the field of ideas that do not lead to activities involving production, it is easier to see the division between material and spiritual necessity. For a long time, individuals have been trying to free themselves from alienation through culture and art. While a person dies every day during the 8 or more hours in which he or she functions as a commodity, individuals come to life afterward in their spiritual creations. But this remedy bears the germs of the same sickness, that of a solitary being seeking harmony with the world. One defends one's individuality, which is oppressed by the environment, and reacts to the aesthetic ideas as a unique being whose aspiration is to remain immaculate. It is nothing more than an attempt to escape. The law of value is no longer simply a reflection of the means of production. The monopoly capitalists, even while employing purely empirical methods, surround that law with a complicated scaffolding that turns it into a docile servant. The superstructure imposes a kind of art in which the artist must be educated. I love that part there. In regards to economy, the superstructure imposes a kind of art which the artist must be educated. Rebels are subdued by the machine, and only exceptional talents may create their own work. The rest become shamefaced hirelings or are crushed. A school of artistic experimentation is invented, which is said to be the definition of freedom. But this experimentation has its limits. Imperceptible until there is a clash. That is, until the real problems of individual alienation arise. Meaningless anguish or vulgar amusement thus become convenient safety valves for human anxiety. The idea of using art as a weapon of protest is combated. Those who play by the rules of the game are showered with honors. Such honors as a monkey might get for performing pirouettes. The condition is that one does not try to escape from the invisible cage. New impulse for artistic experimentation. When the revolution took power, there was an exodus of those who had been completely housebroken. The rest, whether they were revolutionaries or not, saw a new road. Artistic inquiry experienced a new impulse. The paths, however, had already been more or less laid out, and the escapist concept hid itself behind the word freedom. This attitude was often found even among the revolutionaries themselves, a reflection of their consciousness of bourgeois idealism. In countries that have gone through a similar process, attempts have been made to combat such tendencies with an exaggerated dogmatism. General culture becomes virtually taboo, and the acme of cultural aspiration was declared to be formally exact representation of nature. This was later transformed into mechanical representation of the social reality they wanted to show. The ideal society, almost without conflicts or contradictions, that they sought to create. Socialism is young, has its mistakes. We revolutionaries often lack the knowledge and intellectual audacity needed to make the task of developing the new man and woman with methods from the conventional ones. With methods different from the conventional ones. Conventional methods suffer from the influences of the society that created them. Once again, the theme of the relationship between form and content is posed. Disorientation is widespread, and the problems of material construction absorb us. There are no artists of great authority who also have great revolutionary authority. The members of the party must take this task in hand and seek the achievement of the main goal, to educate the people. What is sought then is simplification. Something everyone can understand. Something functionaries can understand. True artistic experimentation ends, and the problem of general culture is reduced to assimilating the socialist present and the dead, therefore not dangerous past. Thus, socialist realism arises upon the foundations of the art of the last century. The realistic art of the 19th century, however, also has class character. More purely capitalist, perhaps, than the decadent art of the 20th century that reveals the anguish of the alienated individual. In the field of culture, capitalism has given all that it had to give, and nothing remains but the stench of a corpse, today's decadence in art. Shit, I like that part. In the field of culture, capitalism has given all that it had to give, and nothing remains but the stench of a corpse. Today's decadence in art. Fucking love that line, actually. But why try to find the only valid prescription in the frozen forms of socialist realism? We cannot counterpose freedom to socialist realism, because the former does not yet exist, and will not exist until the complete development of the new society. We must not, from the pontifical throne of realism at all costs, condemn all art forms since the first half of the 19th century, for we would then fall into the Proudhonian mistake of going back to the past, of putting a straitjacket on the artistic expression of the people who are being born and are in the process of making themselves. What is needed is the development of an ideological, cultural mechanism that promotes both free inquiry and the uprooting of the weeds that multiply so easily in the fertilized soil of state subsidies. In our country, the era of mechanical realism has not appeared, but rather its opposite. This is because the need for the creation of a new individual has not been understood. A new human being who would represent neither the ideas of the 19th century nor those of our own decadent and morbid century. What we must create is the human being of the 21st century. Although this is still a subjective aspiration, not yet systematized, this is precisely one of the fundamental objectives of our study and our work. To the extent that we achieve concrete success on a theoretical plane, or vice versa, to the extent that we draw theoretical conclusions of a broad character on the basis of our concrete research, we will have made a valuable contribution to Marxism-Leninism and the cause for humanity. By reacting against the human beings of the 19th century, we have relapsed into the decadence of the 20th century. It is not a very grave error, but we must overcome it lest we open the door for revisionism. The great multitudes continue to develop. The new ideas are gaining a good momentum within the society. The material possibilities for the integrated development of absolutely all members of society make the task much more fruitful. Fruitful. The present is a time of struggle. The future is ours. God, I love Che's writing. New revolutionary generation. To sum up, The fault of many of our artists and intellectuals lies in their original sin. They are not true revolutionaries. We can try to graft the elm tree so that it will bear pears, but at the same time, we must plant pear trees. New generations will come that will be free of original sin. The possibilities that great artists will appear will be greater to the degree that the field of culture and the possibilities for expression are broadened. Hey, L. Ron Hubbard. Our task is to prevent the current generation, torn asunder by its conflicts, from becoming perverted and from perverting new generations. We must not create either docile servants of official thought or scholarship students who live at the expense of the state, practicing freedom in quotation marks. Revolutionaries will come who will sing the song of a new man and woman in the true voice of the people. This is a process that takes time. In our society, the youth and the party play a big part. The former is especially important because it is the malleable clay from which the new person can be built with none of the old defects. The youth are treated in accordance with our aspirations. Their education is every day more complete, and we do not neglect their incorporation into work from the outset. Our scholarship students do physical work during their vacations or along with their studies. Work is a reward in some cases, a means of education in others, but it is never a punishment. A new generation is being born. The party is a vanguard organization. It is made up of the best workers, who are proposed for membership by their fellow workers. It is a minority, but it has great authority because of the quality of its cadres. Our aspiration is for the party to become a mass party. But only when the masses have achieved the level of vanguard, that is, when they are educated for communism. Our work constantly strives towards this education. The party is the living example. Its cadres must teach hard work and sacrifice. By their action, they must lead the masses to the completion of the revolutionary task, which involves years of hard struggle against the difficulties of the construction, class enemies, the maladies of the past, and imperialism. Role of the individual. Now, I would like to explain the role played by the personality, by men and women as individuals leading the masses that make history. This is our experience and not a prescription. Again, thinking back to when we read this Juche work and what I have tried to tell you about leadership all along. And we will, again, of course, talk about leadership many more times in the future. Because, I think it's an aspect that's very much misunderstood. And is something that could help draw many settlers toward the leadership of First Nations towards liberation, I highly believe. And other oppressed people towards their liberation wherever you are. Fidel gave the revolution its impulse. In the first years, and also its leadership. He always set its tone. But there is a good group of revolutionaries who are developing along the same road as the central leader. And there is a great mass that follows its leaders because it has faith in them. It has faith in those leaders because they have known how to interpret its aspirations. And this right here explains the leadership and what you see in DPRK between the leaders in DPRK and their people. Okay? And this is why after 75 years of this, you have an incredible unity that is not seen anywhere else in the world other than in DPRK because of this. And I'm not exaggerating to remind you, If someone is interested in what the Cubans' opinion is on certain questions, he should ask the Koreans. And if someone asks what Korea's standpoint may be on certain cases, he can safely ask the Cubans about that. Our views are completely identical in everything. Raul Castro. Is this starting to ring a little bit more true as we make our way through this book here to anyone in chat? Do you notice the incredible similarities here? Well, simply that Korea and Cuba both have the idea of socialism. They're both on the scientific road of building socialism and communism, right? And that's why they share the same idea. Fidel gave the revolution its impulse in the first... Sorry, I already said that part. It is not a matter of how many kilograms of meat one has to eat, or of how many times a year someone has to go to the beach, or how many pretty things from abroad you might be able to buy with present-day wages. It is a matter of making the individual feel more complete, and much more inner wealth, and much more responsibility. People in our country know that the glorious period in which they happen to live is one of sacrifice. They are familiar with sacrifice. The first ones come to know it in the Sierra Maestra and wherever they fought. Later, everyone in Cuba came to know it. Cuba is the vanguard of America and must take sacrifices because it occupies the post of advance guard. Because it shows the masses of Latin America the road to full freedom. Within the country, the leadership has to carry out its vanguard role. It must be said with all sincerity that in a real revolution, to which one gives his or her all, and from which one expects no material reward, the task of the vanguard revolutionary is both magnificent and agonizing. Love of living humanity. At the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality. Perhaps it is one of the great dramas of the leader that he or she must combine a passionate spirit with a cold intelligence and make painful decisions without flinching. Our vanguard revolutionaries must idealize this love of the people, of the most sacred causes, and make it one and indivisible. They cannot descend, with small doses of daily affection, to the level where ordinary people put their love into practice. Again, it just sounds so much like everything we read from Kim Jong-il, does it not? The leaders of the revolution have children just beginning to talk, who are not learning to say daddy. Their wives, too, must be part of the general sacrifice of their lives in order to take the revolution to its destiny. The circle of their friends is limited strictly to the circle of comrades in the revolution. There is no life outside of it. In these circumstances, one must have a large dose of humanity, a large dose of sense of justice and truth, in order to avoid dogmatic extremes, cold scholasticism, or an isolation from the masses. We must strive every day so that this love of living humanity is transformed into actual deeds that serve examples as a moving force. The revolutionary, the ideological motor force of the revolution within the party, is consumed by this uninterrupted activity that comes to end only with death, unless the construction of socialism is accomplished on a world scale. If one's revolutionary zeal is blunted when the most urgent tasks have been accomplished on a local scale, and one forgets about proletarian internationalism, the revolution one leads will cease to be a driving force, and sink into the comfortable drowsiness that imperialism, our irreconcilable enemy, will utilize to gain ground. Proletarian internationalism is a duty, but it is also a revolutionary necessity. This is the way we educate our people. Danger of dogmatism. Of course, there are dangers in the present situation. And not only that of dogmatism, not only that of freezing the ties of the masses midway with the great task. There is also the danger of the weaknesses that can fall into. The way to open the infection by the germs of future corruption, if a person thinks that dedicating his or her entire life to the revolution means that, in return, one should not be distracted by such worries as that one's child lacks certain things, and one's children's shoes are worn out, and one's family lacks certain necessities. In our case, we have maintained that our children must have or lack those things that the children of the ordinary citizen have or lack. Our families should understand this and struggle for it to be that way. Revolution is made through human beings, but individuals must forge the revolutionary spirit day by day. Thus we march on, at the head of an immense column. We are neither ashamed nor afraid to say it. Is Fidel. After him come the best cadres of the party, and immediately behind him, so close that we feel its tremendous force, comes the people of its eternity. Of its entirety, a solid structure of individual beings moving forward, a common goal, men and women who have attained consciousness of what must be done, people who fight to escape the realm of necessity and to enter that of freedom. This great throng organizes itself. Its organization results from its consciousness of the necessity of this organization. It is no longer a dispersed force, divisible into thousands of fragments thrown into the air like splinters from the hand grenade, trying by any means to achieve some protection from an uncertain future in desperate struggle with their fellows. We know that sacrifices lie ahead, and that we must pay a price for the heroic fact that we are, as a nation, a vanguard. We, as leaders, know that we must pay the price for the right to say that we are at the head of a people that is at the head of America. Each and every one of us readily plays his or her quota of sacrifice, conscious of being rewarded with the satisfaction of fulfilling a duty, conscious of advancing with everyone towards the new man and woman glimpsed on the horizon. Allow me to draw some conclusions. We socialists are freer because we are more fulfilled. We are more fulfilled because we are freer. The skeleton of our complete freedom is already formed. The flesh and the clothing are lacking. We will create them. Our freedom and its daily sustenance are paid for in blood and sacrifice. Our sacrifice is a conscious one, an installment paid on the freedom that we are building. The road is long and, in part, unknown. We recognize our limitations. We will make the human being of the 21st century, we ourselves. We will forge in daily action, creating a new man and woman with a new technology. Individuals play a role in mobilizing and leading the masses insofar as they embody the highest virtues and aspirations of the people and do not wander from the path. Clearing the way is the vanguard group, the best among the good, the party. The best clay of our work is the youth. We place our hope in it and prepare it to take the banner from our hands. If this inarticulate letter clarifies anything, it has accomplished the objective that motivated it. Accept our ritual greetings, which is like a handshake or an Ave Maria Purissima, Patra o Matra, Patra o Murdera, homeland or death. The road is long. with a many unwinding road. Who knows where? Who knows where? But I'm strong, strong enough to care. Yeah, he ain't heavy. He's my brother. If you know anyone who is addicted to drugs or alcohol. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to remind you this. The noble love and trust shown by our leader and party for the people have produced unfailing loyalty to the party and the leader from the people. Our people had been well known since olden times as diligent and courageous people with a strong sense of justice, a noble sense of obligation, and a high sense of decorum. Our people's fine traits now flourish and develop in every respect, based on new spiritual and moral qualities. Our people are deeply grateful to the party and the leader for their benevolent politics, and work heart and soul to repay the favor with loyalty. Our people's loyalty to the great leader Comrade Kim Il-sung is shown on a nobler plane today, after they suddenly lost their fatherly leader. It is our people's unshakable will to loyally uphold our respected Comrade Kim Il-sung forever as the leader of our party and revolution. And then here's another one that sounded like the Kim Il-sung quote we read. The aim of revolution is to bring love for the people into bloom. Oh, this one's pretty good too, actually. This one kind of gets right at the root of thing. One's good. What do you think, comrades? You're supposed to give me the book review when I'm done reading, remember? Oh, here's another one about the social being we were talking about. Remember, think back about what we were talking about the social being and that Kwame Ture quote, okay? Independence, creativity, and consciousness are humanity's social qualities which take shape and develop socially and historically. Humanity alone in the world lives and conducts activities in social relationship. They maintain their existence and achieve their aim only socially. Independence, creativity, and consciousness are peculiar to humanity, the social being. I'm just glad that you appreciate me reading. I appreciate you saying that, Ernaldo. Thank you. I thought I had another really good one I was just looking for. Oh yeah, here. This one is good too. I know, I'm hitting you with all the quotes now. The art of leadership is the knack of knowing how to get the people to give full rein to their creativeness and initiative. I'm just showing you these because, like, doesn't this sound like what we were just reading about? Actually, and here, this is actually, we know Kim, when he talks about Kim Il-sungism, we know that incorporates Juche philosophy. That sounds very nice, but nukes? What do you mean? Hell yeah, nukes. It's actually a good thing that DPRK has nukes. If DPRK didn't have nukes, they would already have been faced with like a Libya situation, and by that I mean overthrown and open air slave markets return. Yeah. Yeah, nukes for all. Okay, but no worries. Hey, you never need to be worried about. There's never need to apologize for ignorance on my channel. That's fine. Like, of course, we're all ignorant of many things. We're humans, right? We can only understand so many things. Even as a collective species, we can only understand so much within our given window of existence before the next generation has to figure it out, right? That's fine. That's totally okay to be ignorant. That's fine. We are all ignorant of many things. There's many things I don't know. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. No, I know. There's lots I don't know. But like what you have with DPRK is a nuclear deterrent, right? Whereas the U.S. is the one with an offensive nuclear arsenal. And as I mentioned earlier, like the only reason why DPRK or why the Korean government didn't take the whole peninsula is because they were threatened with nuclear annihilation. And through their entire existence have been threatened with nuclear annihilation, right? So how do you keep imperialists from invading you? You develop yourself a little deterrent that scares the imperialists away, right?